I am honored to welcome Shuchi Sarkar to the conference. She is a powerhouse in global marketing, brand transformation, and leadership, and currently the Chief Marketing Officer of LTI Mindtree, a global top 10 technology services company. With over 25 years experience across Fortune 500 companies and startups, Shuchi has led international teams of over 150 people, managed enterprise budgets exceeding $180 million, and built award-winning campaigns that have shaped industries. Beyond her corporate success, Shuchi is a mentor, a public speaker, an advisor dedicated to empowering women leaders and marketing professionals. She serves on multiple nonprofit boards and has received prestigious industry awards, including Effie's, Cannes Lions, and Women in Marketing's Digital Marketing of the Year. Today, she shares insights on leadership, innovation, and ownership. Please join me in welcoming Shuchi Sarkar to International Women's Day Conference. Hello, Shuchi.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for having me, Deborah. That was an incredible introduction. I'm not sure I'm going to live up to it, but thank you.
It's so funny because you're not the first person who said it. And I'm like, you've done all of this. I've just summarized it in a way that is appealing for people, but it is a condensed version of the magnitude of all of your experience. I didn't even put down that you write for Bloomberg or Forbes or one of them. I mean, is it Forbes? It's Forbes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people guests do we have that write for Forbes? So I left that out, but now I stuck it in anyhow. So can you share a bit about your career journey and what first drew you to marketing and how you rose to global leadership?
So, how I got into marketing, I'll start with that. When I was growing up in India, I was very convinced I wanted to have a career in social service. I was, always the person who was heavily in love with fighting for the underdog and justice. And, India was a growing economy. And so there was all these causes I felt very strongly about. But somewhere along the way, I don't know, and I never can identify that one trigger. But over time, I just decided I wanted to do an MBA. And as I go in, as I do that, maybe I'll do something else in a way to help serve the community. My family has a lot of background in doing community service, from where I think that was always a passion of mine from very young childhood. And so I decided to do an MBA, and I'm not a overly numbers person, so finance was out. And in India, we had to declare in the first 3 months of starting what is it that you wanted to do. And I remember walking into my first marketing class, and I don't know if everybody here is familiar, but there's this Bible that you study in marketing when you go and do your MBA. It's called Philip Kotler, An Introduction to Marketing. That's the book. And my first marketing class, I just fell in love with marketing. It was like my heart spoke to it. The fact that you were studying people, and it was all about, understanding the customer and really understanding their challenges and their motivations and how do you position the brand. And the more I learned and studied about brands, I just adored that world. And, my friends tease me today because I'm one of those suckers who will pay that extra amount for the brand. And they say, but you're a marketer, you know what this is. And I say, I know what it is. And that's why I feel like, I love brands, and I'm a worshiper of brands. And I say that I learn all the time. And so I think it was just at this, when I was doing my MBA, I just knew I wanted to do marketing. And as I passed out, I first decided to go into advertising. I remember meeting the boss of Ogilvy at a New Year's party actually when I was growing up in India, and he told me, "Oh, you're passing out and doing in marketing, but why don't you come and work in advertising?" And had not heard of Ogilvy or advertising at that point, and I said. Really, what do you do? And so he said, just come and visit us. So over Christmas break, I went to visit the Ogilvy office in Delhi, and I was just fascinated with the energy and all these people running around doing things. You know how an ad agency is. If anybody has worked in printing, I'm sure I know printing world is very much similar to the ad world in many ways. That creativity, that energy, that innovation, and that is there. And so I said, okay, this is where I'm going to work. So once I graduated, I came back to work for Ogilvy, and that's how I got into marketing. And he told me that in 6 months, either you're going to make this your lifelong career or you're going to leave. And I never left in 6 months. And that's where I grew in HP. They asked me, do you want to grow functionally? As in a program called HP Fast Track, where you had to choose whether you wanted to grow functionally or whether you wanted to become the general manager of India. And I said, no, I don't want to grow functionally. I'm sorry, I don't want to go generally. I want to grow functionally. I want to make my career in marketing. And so from advertising, my leap was to marketing, because while I loved advertising and the energy, the creativity, the innovation, it is just one part of the entire marketing mix. And I found that even as an ad agency, whatever you recommended, finally the decision was the client's. And I said, oh, I have to be the decision maker. And so, a bit of a control freak. So I had to be the decision maker. So I moved over to the marketing side and, went and joined Compaq, which eventually became HP. And that's how my, career from advertising to marketing happened. And from there, and I was very fortunate. I always tell this to people that I think, we pay a lot of attention today. 22 years, 23 years back, there was no such attention to career planning and, okay, we want to grow you in this way and what's the training you need and all of that. Pretty much you had to grasp your own opportunities. And I tell that to my teams all the time, that a career is not only about somebody helping you plan it, it's about you seizing opportunities, whether it's when your boss leaves or whether it's, you read some role and you want it. So for me, when I was in comeback, I got married, and my husband was based in Hong Kong at that time, and I was doing this weird role where I was trying to manage marketing out of Hong Kong for India. And of course, that won't work out. But it gave me an exposure to what it means to be working outside the country. When I was in advertising, this guy who had interviewed me was the branch manager of Ogilvy. And I used to think, if I become a branch manager of Ogilvy Delhi, my God, I would have made it in my career. Like that was my aspiration, to get into his office one day. And I thought, if I do that, that's it. That's what I would have done. But as luck would have it, I moved to Compaq, and I remember I'd just been in Compaq like 10 months, and I used to, I saw that there was a role in Asia Pacific, and having stayed in Hong Kong, I was very keen to go back to that area. And I saw there was a role in Singapore, and the person who it reported to was my boss's boss. And, I just reached out to her and said, look, I worked with you this thing, and I really want to come and do this role. I didn't even discard my boss that time, which was wrong. I should have talked to him first, but I took this, young 20 whatever year old. I wanted to get that role, and she said sure, and I did the interview process, and I got the role, and I moved to Singapore. And then, Compaq was bought over by HP, and my boss said, okay, if you've had your Singapore romance, come back and head marketing in India. And I was about to have my daughter, and I thought it would be good if I had my parents and family around when she was born. So I moved back to India, and I ran HP marketing for a couple of years. But then there was this urge again that, I must do something larger and bigger. So um, I again took the initiative, and I just won a huge award in HP for the launch of a very successful campaign called "The Computer is Personal Again," where we won the best execution in the world. And I had gone to the US to collect the award, met all the top guys in the US marketing, and it struck me that finally, if you have to influence anything in a US multinational, you have to be in the US. Like, that's where all the policies are made, that's where all the great work is driven. And when I remember the guys from Goodby and Silverstein who had created that campaign for us, I was like, oh my God, this is another level of creativity, innovation, and professionalism. So anyway, but my daughter was young, so even though at that time, the marketing head offered me a role to come and work for HP in the US, I said no. But I said, I'm happy to explore a role back in Singapore. And he said, okay. And so I went to run retail marketing at Asia Pacific. And within that, we did such a great job that HP asked me to come to Europe and help them execute all their retail stores and things there. But I still was, feeling that I'm still in the execution thing. I really want to do a global role. I want to influence what the brand looks like, or the campaigns, or the demand generation programs, or whatever else we were doing at that time. And so I thought now my daughter was old enough that I could make the switch to the US. But by that time, HP was in this thing about, we want our talent to be in cheaper cost locations. And so it was becoming difficult to move from Asia to the US, which was the other way around. But I put up my hand for a worldwide director of consumer advertising in PCs, and based on this work that I had done, I was given that role. But doing that out of Singapore was a very tough thing. Goodby was here, my colleagues were here, the product marketing folks were in Palo Alto and Houston. So ultimately, the company said, okay, you need to move to the US. And so I think what I'm trying to say, and that's how I moved to the US. And then eventually within HP, I made a lot of transitions in the US. As soon as I came, HP merged printing PCs and did a whole lot of restructuring. So I went to actually work for the other side of HP, which is the enterprise side. And that's my first foray into B2B marketing. Till then, I was a straight consumer marketing person doing PCs, and before that, advertising. And then I moved into this world of, enterprise marketing. And that also, God, because when I saw these opportunities, I said, look, I've done B2C all my life. I've not done B2B. So I went to my boss and I said, look, I know I've just come to the US, and, I've been doing this role for a year, but this is my opportunity to go there. What do you feel? Would you endorse if I put up my hand for an enterprise role? And he said, I'll miss you, but I understand why you want to do this. Go ahead. But if you don't get the role, there's a role for you in my team. I said, okay. So I went and met, I remember the guy who used to head enterprise marketing. There was a guy called Stephen Dewitt, and I was so impressed with him. I said, hey, give me the role as a janitor in your team, I'll come. And so, but I tell you, the transition from consumer to business market, B2B marketing, was just fantastic. I bought a different perspective because I came from consumer marketing, and I realized all they did was very stereotype emails and a couple of events here and there. And I said to them, the CIO is ultimately a man or a woman. He's a consumer. And so we did some wild things at that time, total guerrilla marketing against AMC, which was, I was handling storage. And for the first time, HP Enterprise actually won awards. And anyway, cutting a long story short, I then, at the split of HP, back to run print marketing for all of the Americas. And Antonio was then the CMO of HP. And, he's the first guy, I have to say, Sajjiv, who brought me to the US, was one person who changed my dreams about what stage I could see myself in. From just being in India to then moving to Singapore, he's the guy who offered me the director consumer role initially in the US. But then Antonio told me, you should aim to be a CMO. And for that, you have to do a global role. And he put me in a very tough spot running the print marketing role, which is where I met Deborah. And I had never done print in my life. I just ran, small print, as in the small format printing, as I used to call it, after I moved to the big print business. And that was all the small printers. But then I came to this large printing business, and that's when I did my first truly global job, where all the regions and the worldwide teams all reported into me. And then, as it was Antonio left, and I felt that I was at a stage in HP where um, I didn't see what next. I'd done everything: enterprise, PCs, print. In any case, enterprise was now a separate company. And I wanted to, I kept getting these things where headhunters would tell me, sorry, but you go and apply in Intel and Microsoft because that's your experience. And, no smaller company will take you because you worked in this big company with big teams and big budgets. And I was hell bent on proving that no, I could be successful elsewhere. And I remember, and I tell this example to you. The first time I moved to the US, the very first meeting that I went to, I walked into a room that was full of white men and one other woman who was also white. And they started discussing college basketball, of which I had not the faintest idea. And then they discussed some soap operas, which I had never heard of, because in Singapore we had two TV channels, even though I'd been in Geneva, but there all the TV was in French and something else. So I was like, I came home and I told my husband, I think I've done the biggest mistake. I'm not going to thing. I mean, I'm so alien here. Ball, I have no idea what soap opera talk about. I thought, I mean, of course, I have to prove my work in consumer advertising, but how do I? And so, I picked this theory about DIY, which is do it yourself culture that the US has, right? In Asia and even in Geneva, actually, luckily. We had helpers. And so, true story, when I was moving to the US, I actually had to learn from my helper how to operate a vacuum cleaner. And I remember the first day when I moved into the house, for the life of me, I couldn't start the washer. And I had an issue with I thought I was literally going to, burn the house down because I did something with the gas stove, which was very funny. And so I started all these stories about my DIY experiments in the US. And they started calling me Queen Shuchi, and soon we kind of bonded together. So it was, and I remember incident when I moved first to Singapore. I had this amazing boss called Lily. She was a Taiwanese Chinese, and she used to sit with a ruler on the table. And every time I spoke fast, she would hit the ruler on the desk. And she told me, you speak so fast in English. You're talking to a person from Thailand and, Hong Kong and all, whose first language is not English. And so you have to speak slowly so that they understand you. So I think that working with different cultures, different diversities, how to really associate with them, and seizing your own career opportunities is really what brought me to that global position in HP. And then I did something completely different in order to prove a point to the world. I went to a biotech startup. I went into the cannabis business, and it was totally different. I was the first marketing employee. I had, I think, from a budget of whatever 120 million, I went to some 3 million budget or something like that. So it was a completely different thing, but it was putting me out of my comfort zone. But did I have fun? It was one of the funnest time in my career. When I was young in marketing, there was no there was no LinkedIn. I didn't know how to set up a campaign in LinkedIn. I had to learn that because who else would do it? I was the only person. And so then, of course, I went back to working for AWS and heading global marketing for all their segments, which was like a $65 billion business. And I had some personal issues with both my parents' health in India. And so I needed to change to a company where I could travel to India and be based there for longer times, because both my parents had health issues. And so that's why I moved to LTI Mindtree, leaving AWS, because this is an India-based company which has got a global headquarters in New Jersey, and I'm the global CMO, so I'm based here in the US. But that's really been my career. And, at times I've taken decisions purely to prove a point or due to a personal reason. I left AWS, which was, to be honest, a great place to be in. But I've always felt that marketing was my thing from day one. I just fell in love with it. I love people. I connecting with people. I'm very curious about the human nature. And I knew that sat with marketing completely. I couldn't imagine myself doing finance or supply chain. So it's also a little bit of process of elimination. But I knew that marketing was my thing. I call myself a marketing nerd. And to get my advice to anybody, based at least on my own experiences, seize opportunities, have confidence, believe in yourself, be, don't be seen, be heard. But be seen, be heard means that you also need to have that sheer belief and confidence that you can reach for something you want, and, make your own opportunities. Don't give up on your dreams. One day you will reach there, as long as, you know, you keep on, people say manifesting. I just say it's all about, making sure that you do the right things, the right networks, the right kind of work, and believe. And, for me, I truly act from my heart. I don't think that works for everybody, but in my case, that's what I've really done. So I know long-winded answer to a very simple question, but I wanted to, just talk about what I did. And everybody has different paths, but I never followed anybody from one job to the other. I think there was some discussion about that happening earlier when I joined. Um, I truly didn't do that. That's also a path to grow, which is to go from, go with a mentor or go with somebody else who goes to another company. I never did that. Every job I walked in, including in HP, when I walked into, whether it was print or whether it was coming to run GSB, I didn't know any of my teams. I mean, I remember going to storage and all the team was based in Colorado, and all they talked about was bears, stories, and skiing and camping. None of those was a big passion with me, but somewhere we found our, connections.
Ironically, I worked at Ogilvy in New York City on the Compact account. So there we were actually connected a really long time ago. And it makes total sense to me that you became a client, because we hate the advertising people that become clients because they know how everything works and you can't pull anything on them. And I also remember the first time I ever met you was at an event, and you looked at me, and the first thing you said to me was, "What do you do for HP?" And I was like, "Oh, there's a loaded question." But I knew at that moment that you wanted to understand how I was adding value to your company, to your mission. Otherwise, I was not going to be doing that anymore. So you pushed me to be able to clearly state what it is that I did. And you helped me understand that if I followed the mission and delivered for you, then I was going to be fine. I just needed to do my job, do what I was supposed to do, exceed if possible, and you would just leave me alone, which is honestly exactly what I'm assuming you want in people that you manage. You don't really want to manage them. You want to help them if they have obstacles, but otherwise let them do their jobs themselves. Um, what challenges have you faced when driving innovation? You pushed a lot of things out of and a lot of people out of comfort zones, a lot of things in the printing industry out of lanes that it was usually in. So, what challenges have you faced driving innovation and how did you push through that resistance and win, which you did?
Yeah. So, I wrote a paper for Forbes, 5 lessons that I learned while driving transformation and innovation, both from my successes and failures. I've had some extreme failures too, let me tell you, where I wasn't able to do it. That has also taught me stuff. And I've also learned from the successes that I had driving change and innovation. The first word that I always use on my LinkedIn, on my resume, is transformative, because that's what I am. I drive transformation and innovation. The challenges that you meet are, everybody, and they're very obvious actually. Everybody is happy with status quo. People do not like to change. And unless you have earned, your stripes with them, they will not also be behind you. So, one of the first things that I always believe, especially since I walk into these new teams and then I want to drive all this transformation and this innovation. And honestly, my last 3 jobs in HP, I was given those jobs, whether it was enterprise or print or digital printing at the NGSP. It was to drive that and to modernize the team from just doing a bunch of events to bring in content and data and SEO, SEM, and social and all the other things. And today it's AI, for example. And I've always driven the transformation, except for when I went to a startup where I was creating everything from scratch. But so the first thing is, it's status quo. It's people are very happy with change. People are not happy with change. People are very used to doing what they're doing. And if you come in, they resist. How do you overcome this? Is for me 2 ways. Number one, I always go after the low hanging fruit where you can prove your credibility. So do something that impacts the business, it does something good, and then you've proved your credibility. Once you've proved your credibility, it's a bit easier to then drive that change because people trust you. They know that you're capable of doing what you've said. So the first is status quo. The second is a loss of control. If when you come in and drive change, people feel a loss of control. Suddenly the power is shifting. They are used to doing things, and you are coming in and saying, now I own the budget. I want to do this. This is what my team is going to do. And I always want marketing to not be a service, but have a seat at the business table. So that loss of status quo, that loss of power is also very uncomfortable for people, and they're not open to doing that. And I think the way for me, again, all stems from, taking people along on that journey. Really, if you start having an opinion based debate, the person who's in power will always win. So for me, this table, bring customer insights. Okay, let's go pilot this here. And if it works in the pilot, then we will take it elsewhere. Okay. So you then try and carry people on this journey by showing them what either others have done or insights or data or research, or at the most convince them on a pilot so that they say, okay, you know what? She's asking for little money in a little spot. Let her do it. Okay. So that's another way to drive this innovation and change. The third is more internal to marketing teams. Many times when you walk in, you find that teams themselves are just used to doing things the way they have. And so that's a resistance. They don't, your own team, your own people don't want change. Forget the business. And so for me, in that, you have to, and I don't come in and fire everybody and bring a whole lot of people that I know. I never do that. I always work with, Deb knows that when I went to GSP, I think I brought one person in, the rest were all the same people. I spend a lot of time upskilling, retraining, reskilling, and it's hard work. And sometimes people say, oh, you're micromanaging, but when you're driving transformation with people who don't have that knowledge, it is to some extent a little bit of micromanagement initially. But then when you know that people have understood what you want, they've got the skills, then you let them go and let them fly. Then you don't have to micromanage anymore. Then you transform to being a leader who inspires and has a clear vision, which you anyway should be doing initially also, but then you stop the micromanagement. So for me, the other thing was, how do you divide the people who will be your change agents, who will be the people who will never come on the journey, and at times you have to take some tough decisions, find them other roles, other things, and then the people who are middling, and then you have to determine who can go over to being change agents and who will not ever be. So it's also about earning your team's trust, creating those personal bonds with them, which is why I said that's really important to me, to create those personal bonds, earning their trust, showing that you have a clear vision and empathy. I think empathy is the biggest thing, apart from having a clear vision and, being able to show people that this is where you want to go. It's really important to have empathy with them and understand and say that I know that in order to drive this change, you're going to get help from your business teams, but I have your back. I have your back. I'm there. So go ahead and do this. And I think for me, that has been incredible, apart from the fact that I've always looked at delivering business results, because the minute you do that and you start making people win in the marketplace, automatically people come to your way of thinking and then want to do more innovation and want to do more good things. So it's a tough battle where, you need to work incredibly hard, at times even be a micromanager till you can actually do that. You have to learn how to carry people, and you have to understand the psyche of every person you are working with, to know this is what will earn me trust with that person, and this is a driver for this one, and make sure that you deliver those quick wins, you understand, get the credibility on the table, and then are able to do the big transformation. And never come and be like a bull in a china shop, where you want to break everything and one day do everything. Never, never, never. Prioritize, go after the big rocks, but after you have earned that trust and that the thing with the folks, then it's much easier to drive that transformation. Never take on too many battles at one go, because you will set up for failure. I saw one of those brilliant guys who joined HP marketing fail, because he took up a battle with every single product guy and sales guy, and he was one of the most brilliant marketers I've ever seen. So I never wanted to make that mistake.
Just a fantastic advice and stories and real life examples of that are just going to help everybody who watches this session. Um, what what we've been listening to is a honed understanding of who you are, and what your goals are as related to the people on your team and the company, and also where you eventually want to end up. We had Hélène Blanchette on before, and she's a similar. Every 5 years she changed careers, no matter what. And I think you were up to 18 months. Every 18 months you were changing something, because you're a crazy person. But what I want to help people understand here on International Women's Day is, if you could just take a step back for a second and share advice for how women can develop and take ownership of their personal brand and find their leadership voice in the workplace.
Yeah. And, I've had times, to be honest, where I felt I wasn't able to do that. But I'll tell you what I felt has worked. I think the first and most important thing is self-belief and confidence. I think self-belief is something that women absolutely need. We need to be heard, we need to be seen. We should not let our voice get lost, okay? And I think that, being able to have that confidence and go for the big dreams, go for the big goals, go for the big things. We are sometimes so scared as women. Men will go and apply for that job that the three levels above them sometimes, and we will feel scared to apply for a job one level above us because we are so scared. We just don't have that confidence. So, my daughter's graduating in May, and I tell her the same thing. Have the self belief and the confidence to go after whatever it is that you want, as improbable as it might seem at that particular moment. And to me, that is one advice that I have as you look at your leadership. Be seen, be heard, be genuine and authentic. Don't change yourself to compete in this man's world. You don't have to be a man to compete in a man's world. Be a woman in a man's world. We are the ultimate nurturers. Okay. I had a boss who used to say, "Oh, you're like a mother hen." I am a mother hen. Motherhood comes naturally to me. We are the nurturers in that organization. And so, our empathy, our compassion, our high emotional quotient that women have, our thing to nurture, our need to create those personal connects that is there because we're uniquely women. That's what will make us stand out as leaders. That will inspire loyalty. That will tell people, say, I always want to work with Deb or Sandy or Cheryl or anybody, because you know what? They have inspired me by who they are, always being who they are, by their personal empathy, by their compassion at every stage. Be a nurturer, be a compassionate, be that emotional voice that, frankly, men lack at many times. Okay. And that can inspire loyalty for you as a leader. So that's the second advice which I have. The third thing that I think is really important for women as you move up the leadership is never lose sight of what you want in terms of your work life balance. I remember trying to be the superhuman being in every part of life. I didn't want to not be a super mom. I wanted to be a super mom. I wanted to be a super wife. I wanted to be a super colleague, a super boss, a super this, a super that. Oh my God, I drove myself crazy trying to do that, be great at everything. I didn't want to feel guilty about anything. I wanted to be there for my daughter at every occasion, and I killed myself to do that. I don't have a single regret on it, but looking back at my career, I would say that, I should have been kinder to myself as I rose through this by not trying to do everything. And it's okay to look for support within your spouse or other support system that you may have, and go for that work life balance and never neglect yourself. There's a point of time that I had put on a huge amount of weight, and I remember I was haggard all the time and all that, and that affected my career because at the end of the day, people are very superficial and also judge you on all those things, because I was so busy doing everything else that there was never any time for me to read, for me to self develop myself. And I now remember, I now wish that I had given myself also some time during those crazy times, because I feel we don't do that as women. And then ultimately, what is we sometimes become burnt out or whatever, and that stops us growing. That's why many women leave the workforce or don't want to go for bigger roles, because they get burnt out or they just don't know how to manage all this. So that's my third piece of advice. My fourth piece of advice is, always be positive. I think for me personally, we need to be more positive than even men are. We always need to look at forget the glass half full, half empty. We just need to think our glass is overflowing at all times. And that positivity is very important as you work through so many things that aren't there. Prioritize, like I mentioned earlier, but also always be this thing, and be kind. Be kind to yourself. Okay, we tend to be our harshest critiques, and we tend to have such high standards for ourselves. And I think, be kind to yourself as well is really important as we go through it. So stepping back, this is what I would say, that be seen, be heard, go after big goals, never lose your authenticity. Don't try and compete in a man's world on a man's terms. Compete on your world, on your terms, what are strong to you. Seek help, look for a support system, create a support group at work, outside work, that helps you, that you can talk to. I mean, chief, for me, for example, the core group in chief is my extended family. I feel like I can go and talk to them anything about in this world and get great advice. And there are women who are facing similar challenges, and they are so much my family now. So create those support groups. We need them. Be overly positive and be kind. So, I feel that I could have done a few things differently. But, I'm a person who never has regrets. So I move on, learn and move on.
I want to be mindful of your time, so if I can ask one last question, what can women in leadership do today to help lift the next generation of female leaders?
I think there's a lot. I think we can mentor and coach. I try and do that both at work and outside work. We can mentor and coach. We can be honest to share our failures. I think we are always trying to live this perfect Instagram, life, which frankly is not true. And I can tell you how many failures I've had and what I've learned from them. And I think that being honest on both your strengths and your weaknesses is important. So I think mentoring and coaching, being honest, as well as leaning in. If you see a woman is struggling, reach out, offer advice, or just have a drink, or, whatever. Be present for other women. So, be there. It's not necessary that, oh, you have to give a job to some woman, just even though you've got a guy who may be more whatever, qualified. But if it's a scale that is same, I would tend towards the woman personally. But I feel you need to lean, what Sheryl Sandberg said, lean in. But I think it's about being honest, mentoring, coaching. It's about being present, and then leaning in as and when you can. And, you know, helping lift women, building their confidence, knowing that in my team, I spend more one-to-one time with my female managers than my male managers, because I know they need that extra confidence and flip many times. Because I know they get emotional, they get more affected by things. If I am, very straightforward in my feedback, sometimes they get very this thing, why did you give me this feedback, especially if somebody was there and stuff. And I say, you know what? We have to learn how to take this. We have to learn to be straight talkers and be direct. And so I spend more time, because I know that the women in my teams are more, they're more emotional.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for really giving a master class in navigating a career that you want, which is a lot different than navigating the career that's been thrown at you and feeling comfortable in that space and never moving from it. You are a beacon of inspiration when it comes to that, when it comes to taking risk, when it comes to creating your own rewards, as well as being a valuable asset to a company, to a team, to consultants who work with you. So I just want to thank you again for everything, and for accepting my answer at the time of what did I do to help HP because obviously we still speak to each other, and I am just honored that when Girls Who Print puts up the Shuchi signal, because you are super Shuchi. I think you are a superhero, but whenever Girls Who Print puts up that Shuchi signal, you answer the call, and I couldn't be more honored and humbled by that. Thank you so much for your time, and happy International Women's Day, Shuchi.
Thank you so much for having me. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect. And thank you for having me, Deborah.